Right, we'll start now. Good morning. Well, I guess good noon, everyone. We'll start the first Innovate Pasadena AMA. So what is AMA? For those people who don't know, AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. So feel free to ask any questions you might have. Just go to menti.com. So every single slide has this instruction at the very top. Just go to menti.com, entering the code 935080, and you should be able to actually type in your questions, and we'll answer those questions one by one. It's all anonymous, so I have no idea who's saying what. You can ask any questions. Today's theme is how to pivot your business model. So this is a theme that we asked the community to actually pick, and I guess the community picked this one. So today I'm just going to answer any questions in regards to the business model, both from the theoretical point of view, but also practical, empirical point of view as well. So again, feel free to ask anything. It doesn't have to be on the business model as well, because at the end of the day, I have no idea who you are, right? Who asked what questions. You can also use the chat too, and I'll monitor the chat as well if you have questions there. But obviously that won't be anonymous. But if you don't care, that's fine, right? So, all right, so let's start. So first of all, a quick thing about what is Innovate Pasadena. So Innovate Pasadena is a nonprofit organization which mission is to advance the greater Pasadena region to become the center of technical and technology and design innovation. So as we all know, Pasadena sits at the intersection of art and science. With renowned institutions like Cal Tech, Art Center, JPL, and of course the Rose Bowl as well. So Innovate Pasadena organize events like this and programs to further the technical innovation community. So a quick word about Spokeo. Spokeo is a leading people intelligence service that organizes about 14 billion records into easy to understand profiles so that people can connect, and know who they're dealing with. So we have two big groups of use cases. There's a lot, because one of the things people don't realize is 8% of searches online are about first and last name. So this is a very big search query type and market. So there's a lot of use cases, but we group them into connectors and protectors. So connectors are people who are trying to connect with others, finding contact information, such as finding long lost families and friends, or businesses finding leads. For protectors, that's actually the more interesting one. People already know who they're talking to, but they just want to verify and make sure people are who they say they are. So one famous blogger once says, "Spokeo before you date." Something easy to remember, right? So Spokeo, and make sure that the person you date are who they say they are, right? Or law enforcement officers, or fraud e-commerce shops, right? Using Spokeo to verify the customer identity. So there are a lot of use cases. We are one of the leading people intelligence platforms that serve this market. So a quick thing about me. I started the Spokeo around 2006, right after college. I went to Stanford, study electrical engineering and economics. Actually, originally I studied economics, and then I saw something called hologram, and I was really intrigued by it. So I looked at a coursework, and I was like, what classes do I need to take in order to understand how hologram works? And I realized I either have to be an electrical engineer or apply physics. And I thought electrical engineer, at the very least, if things don't work out, I can get a job. So at the end of the day, that's why I became an electrical engineer and double major at economics and electrical engineering. One of the things I learned in college, my professor, optics professor, electrical engineering professor, told me that don't ever bet against silicon. So I learned that I either have to go to academia or I have to do something different. And that's why I decided to start a company in 2006. And we started out as a social network aggregator, got into quite a bit of tech press and tech blogs at that time. But soon I realized that getting press is just one step, right? Getting eyeballs is just the very, very first step, because later, how do you sustain that traffic? And then once you have a sustainable traffic, how do you monetize that traffic so that you can keep the lights on? So in 2 years, we tried different things, and we almost went bankrupt twice. A lot of you guys actually who know me knows this story. I actually have to go to my parents because, by the way, our investors are our parents, because no one else wants to invest in some newbies. So we're not VC funded or anything like that, but not because we don't like VCs. We love VCs, just that no one believed in a couple of newbies right out of college in 2006 or 2007. So our investors are the dumbest investors in the world, which are our parents. I have to go to my dad for additional funding, so to keep the lights on. And my dad told me, well, first thing he told me is, I written it off when I give the money to you. I written that off already. So that shows how much confidence he and other investors have in me, right, at that time. And then the second thing he said is that success is not about whether you gone to Stanford or Ivy League. It's about who can last till the very end, right? So we did that, pivoted business model multiple times. And we later realized that people are using our service not to aggregate their content, but rather to search for other people. So we actually stumble across the people search market. So we pivoted to social search engine, and then we pivoted again to people search engine, and then to people intelligence platform. And today we're trying to answer the question of who we are, right? Who is it? Who we are? What is identity? As Shakespeare, I recently like to quote Shakespeare. Shakespeare said, "To be and not to be, what is the state of being?" So that's the question that we're really, really trying to answer. Our mission is to make the world around us more transparent. So this AMA is part of that transparency, knowledge transparency initiatives, right? Trying to share what we know, helping people understand how things work, how the data technology works, as well as how does, who we are, right? What is identity? Now, today's theme, the topic that the community picked is how to pivot a business model. And I thought before I answer some random questions from the audience, I think it's good to level set and make sure we all are talking about the same thing. What is a business model? So I think since we're a data company, we like to talk about definitions, right? And a lot of times people is like, hey, this is a great business model. This business model is cool. We need to change business model, but we don't really have an understanding of what business model is. So I thought it's good to kind of level set and make sure we have the same definition. So based on Wikipedia, I checked this before this AMA, by the way, so you can feel free to double check this. But a business model describes the rationale, framework of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. Okay, this is a Wikipedia definition. It is pretty broad because there are many definitions of business model there if you actually search Google. I think the most common one is, how does a business make money? I actually don't like that definition because I think that's very, very one-sided. So I'll share with you my definitions. Okay. So in businesses, usually there are three legs, three pillars of a business. Okay. And using who as the pillar, right? The people as one of the corners of this triangle. The peoples are customers, users, right? That's one triangle, one angle. The other ones are talent, teammates, right? And the lastly are investors and shareholders, right? And these angles actually each represents the following, right? So customers, users, they represent market. So one angle is market. The second angle, teammates and product people build products, right? Developers, they build products. And lastly, shareholders, investors, they represent finance. So these are the three pillars of a business. And actually, if you think about it, these are the three pillars of a product as well, right? So when we're talking about business models, if you think of these this triangle with these three angles, then the sides will be One of them between product and market, it's called product market fit. Okay. Between market and finance, it's called monetization. And that's what most people actually think of business model is how to make money, how do you get money from the users, right? But again, like I said, this is a very, very one-sided perspective in my opinion, because it's a triangle and you're only describing one side of the three, right? So I think this is very, very short-sighted in my opinion. Now the third side is between finance and I think finance and product, right? And that's basically product development, right? Resource planning and allocations. Right? And actually, if you think of these three sides, they actually correspond to the Wikipedia definition of creation of value, right? Which is about product development, delivery of value, which is about product market fit, and lastly, capturing value, which is about monetization. So that's the definition of business model, right? And when we're talking about how to pivot a business model, then that's with this definition, with this new aligned mindset, I think we can get into the details, right? Because solving a problem, the number one thing about solving problem is how do you make it smaller? How do you divide and conquer, right? So we just divide this big problem called business model into three subparts, and then we can dive into each one of them one at a time. All right. So that's a not so short introduction. So I'll quickly go in and answer people's questions since we only have about 16 minutes. So first of all, what is the history of Spokeo? So I think I answered that question already. So I'm not going to that. With increasing focus on online privacy and how companies are able to use data, how do you see Spokeo adapting to the increased regulatory changes? So that's a very good question. Actually, I at the CES prior to the COVID-19, I went to the CES attending the UCLA at CES event. I was one of the speakers there, and I think this is the common theme, right? People ask me this question, and I think the answer is very simple. It's about transparency, because the data revolution has already happened, right? It has already empowered technologies such as personalization, marketing technologies, and so on and so on. Right? We're not going back in time, right? When the cars gets first invented, there are laws banning cars on the road because people think it'll scare horses. And obviously, we know how it goes. So I think the data revolution has already happened. It's going to continue to move forward. The next question is, how do we empower users to manage and control their data, right? That is the question. If you actually think about it, the definition of privacy is not hiding. The definition of privacy is control over access of information. That's the definition of privacy, right? So I think the next phase of data revolution is control and ownership, right? And I think the foundation of such control is transparency, which aligns with Spokeo's mission. So how do we adapt to this increasing regulatory changes? I think we just have to live and breathe our mission, right? Not just to say it, not just talk about transparency, not just to say it, but actually live it. What does Spokeo's product pipeline look like? It looks great. So there are three things that we invest in, right? One is obviously data, right? The second thing we invest in is search and helping people more easily access and utilize and leverage this data. And lastly is this idea of identity. How do we help people manage and control their identity? So these are the three general broad areas that we actually invest in. We have quite a bit of interesting projects and products that's coming out this year and next year. So stay tuned. What are some ways we need to factor in prior changing business model? So as I mentioned earlier, right, let's divide the problem into three subparts, right? One is product market fit. The other one is monetization, and lastly is product delivery. So for product market fit, and actually, before I get into those things, I do want to say there is no one size fits all solution. And the reason is very, very simple. If you think of a business with the three angles, right? Three vertices, and those vertices are customers, talent, your teammates, and investors and shareholders. They change over time. So your customer base when you first started and your customer base right now are completely different, right? The team members that you started 10 years ago and the team members you have right now are completely different. Investors too, right? They change over time. So your business model actually change over time and you have to adapt it over time, right? So that's one of the things I do want to mention. So there is no one size fits all solution because there are multiple factors at play and these factors change over time. So then let me dive into those details a little bit more. So product market fit, you need to answer the question of, are people finding values in your product, right? So for example, we call this problem subscription paradox at Spokeo, right? A lot of our users' behaviors are transactional, right? Yet our business model is subscription. So how do we deliver more recurring values to our users, right? So that they will stay longer, right? So that's one of the product market fit problems, right? When you're small, I would say this is probably not a big problem, right? Because I actually get these questions from people from time to time and saying like, hey, how do you know who will buy my product? Will people buy my product? I said, this is a terrible, entrepreneurs asking this question. I told them, this is a terrible question, because the question really should be, can you find people who will buy your product? Because when you're starting small, there's definitely someone who's interested in your product. The question is really, are there a lot of these people, and how do you find them, right? So when you're small, I think instead of blaming your issues to product market fit, I think we should always focus more on how do we find these people? How do we find people who are willing to pay for your service? Right? Now, the second thing is like monetization, right? Monetization. You know, how do you determine, for example, freemium models? How do you determine what values to offer for free, what values to offer for to pay, right? In general speaking, I think of free value propositions as marketing tools. So if you have data or services or features that can get users to share them, make it free. Why do you put it behind the paywall? Why are you killing your own referral program, right? But if not, then you can put it on behind the paywall, right? So again, there's many different strategies. I can go into details if people are interested in, but I think these are some of the ways. But the key thing I do want to mention is that business model change over time, and we have to adapt. Oh, I'm going to answer a question from the chat. How do you determine cost of acquisition and new customer? That's a pretty good question. I think the short answer is you have to test, right? So, well, actually, let me divide up this problem into multiple types, right? So let's talk about performance-based marketing, okay, which is what I actually believe in, right? Because brand marketing and TV advertising a lot of times leap of faith. Leap of faith means that, oh, let me just throw in there and then see what works. I think that I don't resonate with that kind of approach as much as performance-based marketing. In performance-based marketing, how do you determine cost per acquisition? Okay, how do you determine CAC, customer acquisition cost? The answer is you have to determine and understand what's the customer lifetime value. What's the expected revenue you're going to get from this particular customer over their lifetime, right? So if that customer lifetime value, LTV is $100, the next thing you have to determine is what's the margin. What's the LTV margin you want to hold? Usually in performance-based marketing, it's about 30 to 40%, right? So then in this case, in this theoretical example, your CAC, your cost per acquisition is $60. It means that you can actually acquire users at $60, right? And how do you do that? There's a lot of platforms to do it, but using a very simple example, you can go to Google SEM, and there's something called CPA, cost per acquisition, right? So you can just set a CPA target, and they will just try to use machine learning. And by the way, I hate hype terms, but they're using the machine learning, basically their algorithms to find audiences to that will be willing to actually pay for you at that CPA level, right? So you can do that. You can also do CPCs and CPMs if you're more sophisticated in how do you manage your digital marketing campaigns. Right. Let me answer this question back to the Menti. What do you think about the trends among businesses during COVID of helping instead of selling? Is this approach here to stay? I think it is, you know, and I think this kind of idea of instead of trying to think about capturing value, right? Like, hey, how do I get money out of customers? Instead of thinking about that, thinking about how do I provide value? How do I help first? I think this approach actually predates COVID-19, right? So let me use an example, content marketing, right? Most of the content marketing campaigns I came across, I know of, right? They're not trying to convert the user after you finish the content. What they're trying to do is they're just trying to get interest, get eyeballs. And what happens is when the user actually see that content, let's say on Facebook, then the Facebook will put a pixel on that user, and then they can do remarketing, right? They can do display marketing and all that stuff to capture that user at a later time. A lot of times at that later time, it means 3 months, 4 months, right? So in content marketing, actually, most of the time, companies are not trying to convert you right here, right then. They're just trying to provide value so that you can actually signal interest, and they can actually convert you later down the road in the life cycle, in the customer life cycle. And this approach really predates the COVID-19. I would say this approach started out about a couple of years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, right? Or even predates that a little bit more. So I think this is definitely here to stay. In fact, I actually think this is the future, right? Because if you think about it, revenue is actually a lagging indicator of what? A lagging indicator of user engagement, right? If you provide value, the money will come in, right? So if you actually go to, you can go to Amplitude, right? Amplitude is a company, they're a product analytics company. There are a lot of great articles about this. So if you think about value capture actually is a lagging indicator. So most of the forward-thinking companies focus on the beginning, the top of the funnel, right? So this approach is not just predates COVID-19 and not just here to stay, but actually I think it's the trend. It's the future, in my opinion. How can we grow the tech scene in Pasadena? Seems like all the action is in Silicon Beach. You mentioned JPL and Cal Tech, which is in Pasadena. Why isn't that helping us grow tech in this area? That's a good question. I can tell you the reason is because we haven't found a unique value proposition, in my opinion. Okay. The way to win is not to say to be the next Silicon Valley. It's not to say that's the Silicon Beach. It's to say we are Pasadena. We are this, right? The way to make Pasadena the next thing is to own it, is to grow it, right? And so what is the unique value proposition in Pasadena that we all align to? I'm going to throw something out there. I think Pasadena is the intersection of art and science. Right? It's not technology, it's science, it's fundamental science. We care about the truth, we care about the foundations of technology. And in addition to that, we recognize that science needs art too. There are a lot of things that cannot be explained by science. A human cannot be explained by science. So there's art as well, right? So that's why I propose, right, what Pasadena should be. But are we all aligned on it, right? Because obviously I'm not the mayor of Pasadena, right? So I cannot call all the shots, right? So what's the aligned unique value proposition of Pasadena? But what I do think is we cannot make Pasadena greater if we just trying to be the next version or copycat of someone else. All right, last question. What is the Spokeo business model? Who are your customers? Okay, so Spokeo's business model, right? Let's talk about monetization. Most of our monetization scheme, right, is through subscriptions, even though we actually offer single reports and things like that. But most of our revenue comes from subscriptions, right? And who are paying for these subscriptions? They are a lot of use cases. Okay, actually, we did a survey before. Our biggest use case, which is dating research, is only about 6 to 7% of our customer base. So our business is quite unique. I call it the long tail business, right? Traditional businesses, such as, let's say, e-commerce selling shoes, right? They just sell shoes and they do segments, right? So shoes, they say basketball shoes, tennis shoes, and so on and so on. Basketball shoes, they do agility, strength, whatever, right? So they segment top down. Spokeo is actually the reverse because we have so many use cases, right? So we actually cluster upwards. And our clustering, as I mentioned earlier, comes down to two big clusters. One is connectors, right? People finding contact information to find and connect with others. The other one is protectors, verifiers, right? I already know who you are, but I just want to make sure what you say is true, right? By cross-referencing different data sources. So long story short, these are the two big clusters, but when you actually drill it down, we have a very, very unique business and market because we have a lot of use cases and users, right? And so we just have to do it upwards, the reverse of traditional brand marketing. All right, so all right, one more question. We have 1 minute. What signals do you consider valuable in determining when to pivot your business model? Very good question. So as I mentioned earlier, when you are starting out, if you're an entrepreneur, usually the problem is not your business model. There's always someone who's interested to buy your product. So you should really focus on how do you find them, okay? And trust me on this. There's always someone who's willing to buy your product, right? Just that, are there a lot? That's the real question. So when you're small, don't blame it on the business model, okay? Just go figure those things out, those technical things out. But now when you're bigger, let's say in our size, then what are the signals, right? So for example, if you're finding that your product improvements and ideas are getting more and more incremental, that probably means you're running out of steam, right? So there's multiple signals that you can consider. But I think ultimately going back to how do we solve problems? Let's divide them into smaller chunks. Is it a product market fit issue? Is it a monetization issue? Or is it your product delivery, right? Like either do you have the right teams to deliver those products, build and deliver those products? Or do you have, and most likely that's half the problem too, is do you have unrealistic expectation of what your teams can deliver, right? So let's break those problems into smaller chunks and tackle them one by one. All right, cool. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for attending today's AMA. So if people find this valuable, I think we'll probably survey the audiences here and then see if we want to do another AMA and then on another topic, or maybe going in depth in the product market fit or areas that you guys are interested. Thanks a lot.